Hello, welcome to Petro Media. My name is Terrence Anderson, and today we're going to do the other side of the video, 10 reasons why it's better to use a DAW versus going DAWless. Now, in my video from last week, we discussed all the great benefits of using hardware and just using hardware to do the creative process before putting it into the box. Today, we're going to discuss the 10 reasons why it's better to start in the box and work in the box. Number 10, load times. When I start up the Phantom, because of how many samples I have in it, as an example, without the extra samples inside of it, it takes about a minute to get loaded. But if I put in my list of samples that I like to use in the Phantom, this is a whole process that I know I need to basically go have a cup of coffee, go make a phone call or two, just do something other than stare at watching these things move along nice and slowly as it's loading for like 4 or 5 minutes. It takes a while. So load times are a problem. Same thing with the MPCs. The MPCs, they're not that bad. The 1000 to 5000 is actually fairly quick with loading, especially with loading the files from the compact flash. It's the 2000 XL, the 4000 even, and some of the older ones, they take forever to load samples, especially compared to this day and age. So that's one of the reasons why it's usually faster to just use software. Software can take a moment to set up and get going, but once it's ready, it's really pretty quick at loading all of your files. Now, number 9 is weird quirks that you have to be willing to live with. When it comes to dealing with hardware tends to have some really strange things that happen to it. And if you're not willing to understand what those are and how to deal with them and how to find workarounds around them, it can be a pain in the butt. When I got the 5000, the previous owner of the 5000 had did some really strange things to it, and I had to find all these crazy workarounds to get things to work. One of the things that was really frustrating to deal with was getting the 5000 to go from one track to the other track and continue playing the program. What that means was if I had a bunch of drums loaded on program 1, and I go and switch to track 2 and program 1 is still there, it wouldn't play the sounds. I would have to go to the program window and hit a pad, and then it said, oh, you want to play these sounds. And all of a sudden now those songs were available on that program, on that track. That got fixed because after your boy cleaned it up and after I reinstalled the software, I stopped having that problem. So whatever happened with the OS, with the previous person, they screwed it up. And luckily I was able to repair it, and I haven't had the problem since. But you have to be willing to dig in. A lot of people will give up just before figuring out why it wasn't working and get frustrated. Number 8 is parts. Parts for older technology gets harder and harder to find. The reason why I went with the 1000 and the 5000 mainly was because the parts are cheap on the two of them, and there's a ton of parts for the 1000, like tons. This one is modded. Mine is modded. It has the battery mod from soundmod.io. I get about 6 hours of battery life. That makes this a great tool for me, but it also means that I have to remember to make sure I have spare parts. But with software, you don't have that problem because for the most part, the hardware itself is what it is. And if anything, it's just the software has updates, but you're not looking for parts. You pretty much have what works. And usually it works on multiple different platforms, with the exception of those softwares that are specific to one platform, like Logic. Only works on Mac computers, but I can use it on an iPad if I really wanted to. I can use Studio One with anything. I can use it with a Mac, a PC, whatever, and I can get the job done. Same thing with Cubase, and on and on and on. So for the most part, you don't have the limitation or the worry, I should say, of this thing might break. What am I gonna do? I don't have these parts anymore. Oh man, it was made in 1992 and that manufacturer no longer exists. Now I gotta go hunt on eBay, Reverb, and Google to find somebody in the middle of Tibet that has one that's been sitting in a box for about 35 years because their uncle gave it to them and they never used it. They never opened it because they saw floppy disks and they were like, what are those things? I'm just gonna put it in the corner, and then they sell it to you for like a couple $1,000 because people do that these days. I don't know why they do that, but whatever. And don't give me that nostalgia crap. This is just price gouging. That brings me to number 7, minimal storage. Most of the older ones prior to these, why I chose these, again, used floppy disks, zip drives, and some used the elusive Jazz drive. If you don't know what those are, look those up. Jazz drives gave you anywhere from 1 gig to 2 gigs of storage. A zip was usually 100 megabytes, and then floppies were small, 1.4 megabytes or something like that, something ridiculously small. You know, if you saw somebody loading something on an ASR 10, you just saw them loading floppies for days. I remember old sessions on the MPC 2000 XL used to take up like 10 or 15 floppy disks, and it was just such a frustrating process until I got a zip drive, and then I had a stack of zip drives. If you go on Amazon or anywhere to find a floppy disk drive today to buy, it is so expensive that it's just not worth it. Same thing with the zip drives. That's why a lot of people who have those are just holding on to them for dear life because they're expensive to replace. Software, again, doesn't have those limitations. We're living in a world where a 1 terabyte computer, 2 terabyte computer is not that expensive anymore. So since storage is so much cheaper, it's just a lot easier to just buy more storage or buy another hard drive and keep it going. I couldn't tell you how many hard drives I have in the house. It's just insane because it's cheap. Number 6, naming conventions. It is harder to name things on hardware versus software. When I have to name something in the MPC 1000 or the 5000, I literally have to, hit save, go to the menu to pick it to go create a new folder or whatever, and then you see the window come up at the top that says you can add characters to change the name. There's a limit on how many characters you can use. I forgot what the number is, but it's not a lot. So you have to be very decisive. If you want to name something really long, like Busta Rhymes, put your hands where my eyes can see. You couldn't do that on here. That thing was probably named something like your hands, eyes can see, or eyes can see. Like you couldn't put that long of a name on the actual MPC because it won't allow it. It's too long. The 5000 allows for longer files, but that causes problems when I go back this way, and I have to remember that. So if I name a file something long on the 5000 and I bring it to the 1000, and let's say there's a series of them. Let's say it's a great example. I have a drum kit. I probably should offer up this drum kit for you guys, but I have a drum kit called the Alien Kit, and the Alien Kit's pretty sick. And the Alien Kit, the names on the 5000 are longer than the 1000. So what ends up happening is the 1000 will load the first file in the series of sounds, but then when you go to the second sound, it'll play the same sound as the first sound. I go to the third sound, it'll play the same sound as the first sound. Why is that happening? Because it thinks they're all the same sound because it understands that the first one has this name. The 5000 has a little bit more characters, but I would assume if I named something on the computer and brought it to the 5000, I would have the same problem if it's too long. So naming convention is an issue with older technology. Number 5 is troubleshooting. Troubleshooting on a piece of hardware when there's something wrong is a pain in the butt. If you don't know what to look for to solve the problem, or if you've never experienced this before, you just went off and said, you know what, I'm gonna buy myself an MPC 62 and I'm gonna update it. This is gonna be amazing. No, it's not, because with the MPC 60, you have to have chips as updates. There's no software update. You don't put in a floppy disk or a zip disk and update it. You have to buy chips. The OS is on a chip. And if you can't access the chip or find somebody who has the chip to sell the chip, now you can't update your operating system. That update most likely solved a realistic problem because that's how it used to be back in the day. It wasn't just a simple bug fix. It was like, oh, this didn't work, here's the fix, boom, it will never have this problem ever again. A bug fix usually fixes the issue, but at some point it may or may not come back depending on circumstance. Usually, the issue just doesn't come back with hardware fixes. So if you don't know what to look for on how to fix a problem when you're troubleshooting, it can be a pain. The Phantom, when I got the Phantom, it wouldn't play the piano correctly. I turned it on, and for some reason, there was this gnarly synth sound in the background of the piano. Previous owner had created some weird patch with the Phantom, and I couldn't get the piano to play right. And luckily, I had experienced it before because my first Phantom, I made that mistake. And I screwed up the way the Phantom behaved. And I fixed it by reinstalling the operating system. And I remembered, I started playing, it took a few seconds, and I was like, I gotta reinstall the operating system. Downloaded a copy of the operating system from Roland's website, installed it in the Phantom, boom, piano and all the patches were working correctly. Same thing with the MPC 5000. It wasn't behaving right, reinstalled operating system version 2, everything starts working right all of a sudden, everything's where it's supposed to be. But let's say I didn't have that option. Now I have to get on Google and dig and dig and dig and dig and pray that some guy somewhere in the middle of some other country, or hopefully in our country, who had a device back in 1982, who experienced this exact problem, is not only still around, but also still remembers how to fix that problem and has put up a post somewhere that I could find how to fix that problem. If that doesn't happen, now I have to invent how to fix that problem or get rid of the device. That's annoying. With software, 9 times out of 10, the problem is a glitch. Again, this is going back to bug fixes versus fully fixing the problem. Bug fix is usually a Band-Aid, and that Band-Aid can sometimes break. But the easy fix for that is to just turn the software off and restart it. And how hard is that? Almost all software nowadays has an auto save feature. If you don't have your auto save feature on, turn it on. You should have it on. Logic, one of the reasons I love Logic, I don't even have to create the session for it to autosave. So if I start up my Logic session and I start to put anything into it, it immediately creates a temporary session called Untitled whatever. Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. I have a bad habit of not saving my sessions till like a few minutes into creating something inside of Logic, because I'm just in the flow of what I'm doing. I'm in my flow state when it comes to production. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta name this something. So once you do that, it deletes the autosave version and creates the one you actually want it to be, and it moves all the data there. But if it crashes for any reason during that time or freezes and I have to restart it, it automatically saves it to the unsaved, untitled format. So I still have everything I did for the last 5 minutes that I didn't create a session for. Software is good for that. Number 4, no modern features. With hardware that's before a certain time, doesn't come with the great features that you love in your current technology. So as an example, the MPCs and the Phantom don't have stem separation. They just don't do that. You have to separate it the hard way. It usually meant using some kind of filtering method. On the MPCs, they usually meant using a high pass and low pass filter and filtering out sections and squeezing things into and compartmentalizing. And that itself created a sound that is so unique to those devices that it's so recognized today. When you hear a Jay Dilla record and you're just like listening to the sound of it and you're just like, wow, why does it sound that way? Because he chopped it that way. And then on top of that, usually with those machines, especially from the 2000 XL and before, we had a behavior of filtering the bass out, but then replaying the sample in the same notes with just the bass section. So now that created an artificial bass line to go along with what you did with the melody section. So they created workarounds, but with software, the new software, you can just separate the stems and you have the bass, you have this, you have that, everything's done. The software has other different routing features built in. Most of your stock EQ compressor, reverbs, delays will do everything you need to do. You really don't need any of the aftermarket stuff. The only reason you get the aftermarket stuff is because there's a specific sound that you like. For example, I love things with Neve sounds. So I have the Plugin Alliance, the Channel N. I have the Voostech model modular N, I believe is what it's called. It's like a lunchbox style Neve setup. That thing sounds amazing. If you haven't picked that up, you should pick that up. I should find it and put a link in the bottom of my description. You should pick that up. That is worth it. Same thing with mixing my sessions. I use the SSL Channel Strip 2 on every channel in Logic. Why? Because I started in studios with the SSL and I know the SSL well. The SSL was not always the greatest for recording, Its job was to mix because it was usually transparent. I believe I'm correct, the 4000 added character to the sound, but the 9000 was very transparent. What you put into it is what you got out of it. So you wanted to make sure you had all the character done beforehand. We used to record on a Neve 88R first and then transfer it to the SSL and mix on the SSL because the SSL was so much easier than the Neve to mix. So doing it in software, you have all of those things at your fingertips and all these options, and it just makes it so much faster to work. Number 3, no updates. Now in the previous video, I had said how no updates are great, but also no updates can also be a problem because when you have no updates whatsoever, you can't make any new changes. When it comes to certain hardware, that's a great thing. That means you now have a dedicated device for its purpose. This can be replicated in software, but you have a dedicated device for that purpose. But also remember, that thing will never have the ability to change to become something else. As I stated in the previous point, I could never get stem separation on a Phantom X6 or the 1000 or the 5000, and I have to live with that, and I'm okay with that. Number 2 is equipment failure. Equipment failure is a pain only because most of the time you can't replace these devices because it's hard to find them. The reason I chose the ones I chose is because I knew there was tons of them on the market. So if there was something to go wrong, I know for the next couple of years, easily 5, 6 years, maybe 7 years, I could find one of these. I'll probably end up buying an extra one of each of them just because. But older devices, the 2000 XL was the #1 selling MPC on the planet, period. So there's so many of those available, which is great. But trying to find a 60 right now in great condition, which is half the reason why the prices are so high, because there aren't a lot of them. The 5000, there's a fair amount of them out there, but there'll never be another one made. So that's something to think about. There's no updates, there's no more. What's out there is what's out there, and that's it. And that means that when something goes wrong, you now have to think about, how do I deal with this? Because do I buy another one? Do I just switch to software? Oh, do I have to change my workflow? Like all those things start to come into the equation and forces you to make decisions, whether right or wrong, for what you're trying to do. The #1 thing that makes working in a DAW better than hardware, templates. Templates are great. Templates matter. If you are trying to create a session for anything in software, you should already have a template. As an example, when I go to make a record for sync licensing for TV and film, I have a template that loads my master channel with everything I put on the master channel already loaded, turned off, because I don't mix with it on, I mix with it off. If it's not perfect before it gets to the master channel, then you did something wrong, because the master channel ain't gonna fix it. I also have my reverb that I prefer loaded, my delay that I prefer loaded, my channel strips are already preloaded, so the SSL's on every channel already. This all speeds up what I'm doing. When I dump the audio into the session and I start to work, I shift things around slightly, and then I can just do a quick mix, the initial first pass, and then start making fine adjustments. The whole mixing process for me, from a session, from getting it from the hardware and dumping it into the software, takes minutes for me to like really configure where things are going, and maybe another 20 or 30 to actually get the actual track positioned the way I like it, to the point that now maybe I'll sprinkle some extra things in from Logic. If I'm working directly in Logic only, I have an MPC style template for creating tracks where everything flows together and I can just move to the next tracks. And that helps me stay on pace so that I'm not slowing down for 3 seconds to say, oh, did I need to do this? Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, how do I, wow, I have 35 delays. Do I need one of those? And now all of a sudden, I'm starting to lose the idea of what I was doing. Yes, I'm still hearing it playing over and over and over, but the idea in the head of what I wanted to add to it is starting to dwindle off and go somewhere else. And you don't want that to happen. You want to be able to get all of the ideas out fast. And that is why templates matter. Same functionality and thought process of how I go into an MPC, 5 minutes, I'm done with the idea. I need to go into software and do the same thing, and templates allow me to do that. That's why that matters. And those are my 10 reasons on why it's great to work inside of a DAW versus hardware. I hope you liked the 2 videos on this to show you both sides of why I have a hybrid setup, why sometimes I just grab a Studio 2 and work with the MPC2 software. Still not a fan of this layout. Don't really like how this thing works, but I do like the software. I do like the MPC2 software. So this is gonna have to get replaced pretty soon. But that's one of the reasons why I grab this and just get to work and knock something out real quick. And that's also the reason why I grab this and get to work, or I grab this and get to work. And the end result goes into Logic to finally work on it after I deal with the MPC2 software. Or I start in the MPC2 software, or I start in Logic and I knock out what I'm trying to do and just get it done. So if you like what I've been talking about, like, share, and subscribe. And feel free to go down in the description and click on any of the links. I have a list of things that I think are great for beginners, intermediate, and professional music production people. I think of them as suggestions on equipment that you should consider that will help you along. I'm not gonna say that they're perfect, because at the end of the day, it's about how you need to work and what works best for you, not what I think is best for you. Join me next time. Like, share, subscribe. See you later.